Hello, and welcome to the Infinite Love Podcast. This is a place where we share how love can transform negative emotions and pain into strength. We talk about all things related to love, positivity, and kindness. And I am your host, Corinne Camara. Hello, and welcome to episode 1 From Undeserving to Worthiness. Today we're going to talk to Thais Sky. She is a truth-speaking, edge-dwelling, trauma-informed health coach and teacher whose multifaceted approach to healing has transformed the lives of hundreds of women worldwide. She offers her thoughts weekly on a podcast called Reclaim, and for over a decade, Thais has coached visionaries, seekers, and cycle breakers who are ready to reclaim their worthiness and take up greater space in the world through her one-to-one work as well as her year-long signature program, Worthy Women Rise. Recently, she has started mentoring coaches who want to deepen their work. She holds a master's degree in clinical psychology and infuses shadow work, social justice, family systems, interpersonal neurobiology, and attachment theory into her approach to tending what she calls the worthiness wound. You can learn more about her at iamthaissky.com or find her on social media at iamthaissky. And welcome to this episode. Welcome, Thais. I'm so excited to have you here on the Infinite Love Podcast.
I am thrilled to be here.
Yeah, this is exciting. So tell us about you and what brought you to the place you are today. I know that you're a therapist. Well, you're soon to be a therapist.
Yeah, I'm an associate therapist in the state of California. I am also a life coach. So I've been a life coach since 2010. And my journey started with an eating disorder and attempts to figure out how to be skinny. Right? Like how to fit the cultural norms of what it means to be beautiful. And I was in college. I went away to college. And I was, I think, also having an identity crisis of figuring out who am I in the world if I am not just a daughter? Who am I in the world if I am on my own? And that started a tremendous journey over the past over 10 years of answering that very question. And so, yeah, it's an honor that I now get to work with women all over the world in my coaching practice. I've developed a concept called the worthiness wound, which I'm sure we'll talk about. And more recently went to school, got my master's in clinical psych and working towards licensure.
That's so exciting. So was your eating disorder what I like to call the love lesson? So love lesson is essentially a lesson that where life really brought you to your knees, where you decided I have to change who I am, because if I don't, my life isn't going to be the way I want it to be.
100%. Yeah. Although at the time I obviously didn't think that it was a lesson. There's a leaf blower that just so happened to start right outside my window right now. So apologize for that. But yeah, so at the time, I certainly didn't feel like a lesson. At the time, it felt like I was being punished, right? And I couldn't see out of the narrative that if I really wanted to live my life, it had to look a very specific way. And I think that that's where many of us start the spiritual journey, is we start to rub up against the fact that how we are understanding the world isn't leading to fulfillment, right? Isn't leading to kind of the eternal happiness that we've been promised. And so at the time, like I was, doing everything that society told me that to do, go to college, get good grades, have a car, blah, blah, blah. And yet none of it was leading to any type of significant satisfaction. So 100% now looking back, I definitely see my relationship with food and my relationship to body to be the catalyst that pushed me towards creating more awareness on how I had been living by default and how it wasn't working for me.
Nice. So then because of that, you decided to go become a life coach, because you became a life coach first.
Yeah. So in that journey, I started to develop tools that were working, I found were healing. I was studying Buddhism and other ancient philosophies.
Mm-hmm.
I started going to yoga and starting to understand the mind body connection, start to understand that, oh, right, it's not just a head that controls my body, but actually my body has inherent wisdom, and it's not meant to just be demonized and contorted to look a certain way, that maybe there was actually inherent wisdom in its very existence. And so I graduated college and I was working at a 9 to 5 and just feeling like I was meant for more than working a 9 to 5, but I didn't know what that looked like. So I got my yoga teacher training certification, started entering the wellness world, then got my life coaching certification as a nutrition coach, and started to do that. But I joked that I consider myself like a reluctant entrepreneur because I never really wanted to work for myself. I just knew that there were things that were working and helping me, and I wanted to help other people. So it would take another 5 years of working in the corporate world for me to finally get the courage and for circumstances to come together in a way that finally felt like it was the right time to go and do coaching full time. And that was in 2015. I lived in the East Coast. So I moved to California to move in with my ex-partner and start my life coaching business.
Wow. And full on, you've always worked with women from the
Always
beginning?
worked with women. I had like one quote unquote clarity session with a man, and we ended up not working together. Very quickly, I realized that there's something really uniquely special about women's psychology.
Mm-hmm.
Just in terms of the ways that we've been indoctrinated, not because our brains are inherently different. I think that can get very confusing for people, because now we're starting to talk about hormones and whether or not
Mm-hmm.
there's a difference between the male and female, and what does it mean to have gender and sexuality and all of that really beautiful, potent conversation. But for me specifically, I'm referring to understanding within myself how I have been raised in a very specific lens because of my female body, and it's
Yeah.
vastly different experience than men or those born in the male body. And so I wanted to work with that type of psychology,
Mm-hmm.
and create spaces for just women, which is wild that I even do that, because when I first started with the whole healing and eating disorder thing, I didn't trust women. I didn't like
Mm.
women. I had predominantly male friends. I thought women were catty and all they like to do is gossip and shop and clothes and hair. And I think that was because of a deep distrust with the female figure and with my mother. And so as I started to tend to the mother wound, I started to feel safer around women. And now I only work with women.
Wow. Yeah. It's interesting that you said that. Like when I was younger, I didn't have a lot of girlfriends either. It
Yeah.
was mostly male, and I just felt more comfortable in that space. And until I started doing that deeper work, then I started to
Yes.
understand the power of women in terms of community. Like having women in community is just so powerful.
And it's such a statement, right, to how we've been indoctrinated in our patriarchal culture to mistrust women. It's not
Mm-hmm.
that women are inherently distrustful, it's that we have been taught to distrust women, that there is a lack, that there is competition, that we are gossipers and shoppers. And so the comfortability with men, I think, really speaks to the patriarchal narrative that men are the norm, and that the
Mm.
closer we align with men, with patriarchy, the more we'll be protected and supported as women, when that's just not the facts.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I want to talk more about the worthiness, because that's such a huge wound for most women. I know for me, I have
Uh-huh.
to do so much work about feeling worthy, especially as a
Mm-hmm.
Black woman, feeling as
Mm-hmm.
worthy to even be alive. And
Mm-hmm.
how do you work with the clients around that?
Yeah, I mean, so I conceptualize the worthiness wound because of my own lived experience with my worthiness, and just this unshakable sense that there's something really wrong with me and it didn't seem to go away with confidence and skill, right? So we
Mhm.
often think that we use the words confidence, self-confidence, and self-worth interchangeably, but it's very different. Self-confidence comes through practice and skill.
Right.
You do something over and over and over again, and become more confident in that skill, where worthiness is just like you said, like a deep sense that you're allowed to exist, that you're allowed to
Mhm.
be on this planet. And I have always carried this unshakable sense that I am not worthy, that I am not, that I am inadequate, that there's something really wrong with me, while also the narrative that I'm too much. I'm too much for the world. I have too many needs, too many feelings, etc. And so I've become really intensely interested in that space and how to heal that space. What do we do? How do we navigate this very overwhelming and sometimes debilitating wound within us? And so I started doing research and continually working with women who are experiencing similar things to me. And I found a couple things. I found that that there are risk factors for cultivating, developing a worthiness wound, and there's protective factors. And knowing what are risk factors and protective factors for us can help us understand why the worthiness wound may be playing out in certain areas of our lives. So, for example, you mentioned that you're a Black woman. So in our white supremacist culture,
Right.
being Black is a risk factor. The more marginalized identities we have, the more likely that we develop the worthiness wound because of those cultural norms, cultural narratives. However, if you grew up in a predominantly Black household, right, and had a very supportive Black family around you, that could be a protective factor because there is Black magic in that. There's a supportive environment in that of seeing yourself in another,
Mhm.
and being supported in that. Um, Another example is being gay, right? If you being gay is a marginalized identity in which it may be, you may feel the worthiness wound, but then if you grew up in a heteronormative household, then you don't even have your sexuality reflected in your family system.
Mhm.
And so then that family system, if it's not supportive of you, could be another risk factor, right? So knowing the risks, knowing the protective factors can help us understand what we need in order for us to get community care around our worthiness wound.
Mhm.
So if you have a marginalized identity, it's going to be important for you to find communities with that identity. It's going to be important to be embedded in some way, in whatever way feels comfortable and relevant for you. For example, we're talking about being gay within the gay culture. That can be very supportive for you. So the reason why I'm saying all of this is because I want to make sure that we're talking about the worthiness one from multiple levels. We're not just talking about self-healing, but we're also talking about community healing and cultural ramifications. Because I think oftentimes it can be very easy for us to think, I have the worthiness wound, I am defective, and I have to fix it, right?
Mhm.
Like I have to fix it. And I think it's important for us to ground ourselves in, you have the worthiness wound. It's not your fault, and you don't have to do it alone.
Right.
And so, okay, so the community care element is really important. And in terms of like self care, I think one of the most important things that we can do when it comes to tending to the worthiness wound is starting to understand the specific flavor that the worthiness wound plays out in our lives, right? Like,
Mm.
get really intimate with knowing how it comes up, when it comes up, what does it tell you when it's activated within you. For so many of us, we really try to diminish the fact that we even have this wound. We try to pretend like it doesn't exist or it's not a big deal. We judge ourselves, we criticize ourselves for having the worthiness wound, and that judgment separates us even further from the wound. And whatever we judge, we cannot integrate. And so
Mm.
it's really important for us to develop the capacity to know that the worthiness wound is playing out, to be very curious about what shape and flavor and experience it takes up. The more intimate we can become with the wound, the more we then know what to do to tend to it and take care of it and heal it, so that it doesn't need to be so loud, such a loud presence in our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because I don't necessarily know for me, like I couldn't necessarily go straight to feeling worthy. Like
Mm-hmm.
it was other emotions that when I got
Yes.
deeper into that emotion that I was like, oh, actually, it's because I don't feel worthy. Like
Yes.
having a wound, feeling like, oh, I don't fit in this environment, or I was bullied when I was younger. It was like, okay, I can focus on the bullying, but really when I go deeper into that space, then it's like I get into like, oh, I didn't feel worthy to even be in that space.
Right. That
You know,
lack of
so
belonging.
right. So I think it's to be patient with it for those that are listening that are on that
Mhm.
path of self-discovery. Like sometimes it's not exactly what you think it is. The wound isn't always what you think it is.
Yeah, getting very curious, and trusting that the path will take you to process what needs to be processed. Your
Hmm.
journey is already taking you there. And if you're like, well, where do I begin? Look at the places you hate yourself. That's a perfect place to begin. All the
Mm.
places that you hate, diminish, judge yourself for, those are all beautiful entry points into cultivating compassion, awareness, empathy and understanding of why you are experiencing what you are experiencing. And that's
True.
what, some people call shadow work, but I agree, I call that shadow work as well, but I'm more inclined to think of it as the work, right? Like I don't
Hmm.
understand what other work there could be but
Yeah.
integrating and loving and understanding all parts of ourselves.
Exactly. Yeah. For me, I agree. Like, I don't really understand the separation. Like that creates more separation. Like
Yes.
parts of me is shadow, part of me is light. Like
Yes. And
we're all
all of
just
it is
one.
necessary.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It just sparked my curiosity about you just spark your curiosity about yourself. But one of the things for some people, like they can't necessarily look at places they hate
Mm-hmm.
about themselves, but I found it useful to, if there's somebody that I was really judgy about or something about them that really annoyed me, I would look at myself, like what
Yes.
inside me is being triggered by this person that I
Yes.
don't like. And that would
Yes.
always give me an indication of, oh, this is actually something I don't like about myself.
Yes. Or something that somebody did to you and really hurt you, right?
Right.
It's not always necessarily what you don't like about yourself. And I think that sometimes we get tripped up with that, where it's like, well, why do I hate murderers? For example, is it because
Hmm.
I'm a murderer? And it's like, I mean, sure, we can get into the philosophical conversation about whether or not we are all capable of murder. But I think what's more interesting is if it has such a strong reaction for you, what happened to you, what associations do you make
Hmm.
with, for this example, with murders that elicit so much? It may be that there's a part of you that you're really scared that you're capable of hurting
Right.
other people. That is very real. It could also be that, let's say somebody really hurt you, or your pet died as a child and you kind of implanted this idea that someone killed your pet. It could be so
So many
complex,
things.
so many things. And that's why it can get really overwhelming when we're doing this work. It's like, where do we start? And there's so many things. And that's honestly where I always recommend people getting support. Like, you don't have to do this alone. You don't have to figure it all out by yourself. And
Hmm.
there is, particularly for relational, I look at the worthiness wound as a relational wound. It stems out of relationships. And so we heal relational wounds through relationships. And so seeking support, getting help, we don't have to do this alone and figure it all out by ourselves.
No, but it's also finding the right type of support too. Like
Uh-huh.
just
100%.
because, there's lots of different types of support out there.
Yes.
So I think for
100%.
me, you also kind of have to, because I know people that go to therapy for years and nothing really shifts for them,
Doesn't do anything.
and then they do yoga and then all of a sudden they feel healed. So it's
Yeah.
really, I think the process of curiosity about how you feel about yourself, but also being curious about the process and finding different practitioners that could help and support you, not get stuck on one.
100%. And what can be useful is to remember that even though there's probably a really valid desire in your healing to reach the utopia healed destination where now you're going to feel worthy and nothing bad is ever going to happen to you, that's not actually what happens when we go on the healing journey. We don't actually arrive there at some utopian place, but rather the healing journey in and of itself is the invitation, right? To be in the process of is the actual destination. And so when we unhook from this pressure, this expectation, that we have to be healed in order for us to be happy, and we can actually just trust that the process itself is going to take us into our happiness, it can then open us up, like you said, to be really curious about what type of support we need, where we need
Hmm.
to go, etc.
True. Yeah, it's all about the journey. And I think it's
Mm.
about falling in love with the journey. I know for me, I had to come to that space because when you're
Yeah.
on a journey, you're gonna hit lots of different pain points within your,
Yes.
and sometimes it's just so painful you just want to stop. You're just like, I'm
Agreed.
done.
Yeah.
And if you find that, for me, what's really helpful is having that big reservoir of love and also knowing that, okay, this is the path. And then once you go through something, I know for me, I physically feel lighter. Like if there's this
Yes.
like weight that gets lifted off me, and I'm like, oh my God. Like then it gives me inspiration to go deeper because I'm like, oh, I feel so great having gone through that. What else can I uncover so I can be free?
Yes. Yes. Exactly. These little wins can feed us and nourish us.
Hmm.
I think that's really poignant. I'm glad you shared that.
Yeah. So let's get into some infinite love questions.
Ooh, so ready.
Okay. How do you use love in your work?
You know, when I was awakening, my awakening process of understanding how my eating disorder was the whole thing. You know, I was very atheist, very resistant against any type of God figure. And when I started awakening, when I started doing the work, I had a dark night of soul moment where I was so alone. I was so scared. I was in my friend's apartment. It was the middle of the summer in Boston. There was no air conditioning. And there was like a block of cheese in the fridge, and it's all I could think about was like eating that block of cheese and knowing that I was probably going to binge off of it if I gave myself permission to eat it, and just feeling so scared. And that was the first time I prayed, you know, and I said, help me, I'm scared, God, you know, hi, remember me, I'm scared, help, you know. And I got a response, you know, and the response was like, you're going to be okay. And first off, that's so anticlimactic, but also so exactly what I needed to hear in that moment, that there is a presence that is supporting me, right? That there is something beyond my intellect that is guiding me on this journey. And that's when I started awakening to the possibility of God, of spirituality. And I read A Return to Love by Marianne Williamson, and the connection she makes with God and love. And that started to really resonate with me. That love is just this force that unites all humans, it unites all of us to something so much bigger than ourselves. And that spiritual knowing it grounds me in my work. It can be very difficult, you know, in the world of coaching and therapy to kind of get lost in the shadow and get lost in the symptoms and get lost in the suffering and the pain. And what really roots me in this work and guides me, and what I hold for my clients, even when sometimes they can't hold it themselves, is that you are actually a being of love, that you are full love, that you are capable of so much, and that this is a part of your journey, a part of your story, but it's not all of who you are. And all of who you are is so beyond what you think is possible for you. And that hope keeps me in a space, in a container where I can really hold the complexity that they bring in without needing to fix or change or judge. Because if I can hold that somebody is an embodiment of love, then there's nothing I need to do to fix or change them.
Nice, nice. I love that. And how do you feel your work is being used to uplift humanity?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really cool when I see other people use the language of worthiness wound. It's really cool to hear people make connections about their experience and to be seen in it. There's something really powerful about, like, let's say reading a book and being like, oh, I see myself in these pages.
Mm,
It's a level of attunement that I think most of us missed as children. And it's a really deep, important developmental need, is to be attuned. And so if we didn't get it as a child, it makes so much sense that we're so thirsty for it as adults. And so to be seen in something, to be seen in a model, seen in a book, seen in a concept, and to know that that means that now it's all going to start to make sense, that maybe you're not broken, that maybe there is a pattern to what you're experiencing, I think is tremendously liberating. And I hope that it's impacting the planet in a positive way, because it's been impactful for me in a really important way.
yeah, wonderful. What does it mean to you to be a positive force of goodness in the world?
I think for me, it means showing up in all of my messiness. I
Mm,
think it can be really easy to believe that in order to be a positive force, you have to be fully positive, right?
mm,
Like you have to exude this perfect lifestyle, this perfectness. When I'm actually most inspired by people that are able to show up and say, this is who I am. And
right.
it's not perfect. And I'm working on it. And I'm also unapologetic that this is where it's at right now. And
Mhm.
so I strive on my social media platforms that when people like that, there's a congruency that if you see me on social media and then you talk to me, it's the same person, and
Right.
that person is bubbly and passionate and messy and makes not quite funny jokes that people smile because they feel awkward because right like now right it's like I want to be a reflection that this world can hold space for all of who we are. We don't have to narrow and contort parts of
Mhm.
ourselves in order to be acceptable. And I've been working really hard and owning and embracing all of my dark stuff so that I can be a force in the world that is unapologetic and in my muchness, in my neediness, in my bossiness, in my emotionalness. I'm not
Mhm.
going to be apologetic about putting people in a state of discomfort because of my muchness.
I love that. So you pretty much embrace everything that of who you are.
I mean, I'm working on it. Working on it, sister. I can't say I've reached there, but
Uh,
I'm certainly working on it. And most importantly, the aspect of this that I'm working on the most right now is to let go of the need to mind read what other people are thinking of me.
mm, that's so
Like
important.
I've become slowly over time, over 10 years of this stuff of like, am no longer interested in trying to figure out what you think of me. You either tell me or I'm not going to think about it. If you have a
Mhm.
problem with me, if you're upset with me, if you're hurt by me, I'm going to trust in your sovereignty. I'm going to trust in your fullness that you're going to communicate that to me, but I'm not
Mhm.
going to be sitting here whirling on whether or not you hate me, you know? And if I find myself whirling in that, I then need to have a conversation with you and say, hey, I'm feeling something. Is this true? Nine
Mhm.
times out of 10, I swear to you, the response is,
No.
yeah, no, I haven't been thinking about you at all. And then that's another
Mm.
affirmation that I actually know very little about what other people are experiencing.
Mhm.
And so my partner has been reflecting this to me where he refuses to mind read. So if I'm grumpy and stomping around the house, he'll be like, what's going on? And my response, like, are you upset? He'll say that, are you upset? And I'm like, you should know by the fact that like I'm slamming things and stomping. And his response is always like, I'm not going to mind read. If you don't tell me, I'm not going to assume.
Mm.
And that has been really permission giving for me to do the same for people. I'm not going to
Mhm.
assume. I'm not going to try to contort and mind read. Of course, there's a certain level of empathy. I'm not saying I'm not doing it unempathically, but and being mindful of my presence and impact on other people. But if people don't communicate to me, how am I supposed to know? And if I don't communicate to people, how are they supposed to know?
Yeah, communication is key.
It's
Yeah,
so key.
I've been working on something similar, but for me, it's judgment. Like, stop
Uh-huh.
worrying that people are judging me because they may or may not be judging me anyway.
Yeah, they're
So I
gonna
could
be.
still right, and I should just still be me. For me, because I had to work on my own judgment, being so highly critical, and I noticed that my projection of judgment is really that
Yes.
I am afraid that everyone else is judging me. So instead
Yes.
of being judged first, I'm gonna judge you.
100%.
And once I
100%.
came to that realization, I was like, oh, so then I shouldn't really care if
Yeah.
what people are thinking.
And people can hold more complexity than we think they can,
Right.
right? Like we think that people's judgment of us is like one dimensional, like, oh, ew, right? That's I think our biggest fear is that people are going to be
Hmm.
like, ew. When really, I think most people, not all, of course, but most people can hold complexity. Most people can be like, ew, right now, but overall, cool, or whatever their
Yeah.
experience is, which most of the times isn't even thinking of you at all. They're thinking about their own stuff. But
Everyone's
yeah,
thinking about their own stuff.
yeah, I'm always like,
Yeah.
oh, whenever I ask people what they think of me and they tell me, I'm always so surprised that they can see the good and the messy. Because I'm assuming you just see the bad. And
Right.
so as an exercise that like I have people do, and that I encourage anyone who's listening to do, it's really uncomfortable. Of course it is, but ask the people in your life for, feedback, 5 ways that 5 things that they think about you, or 5 traits or whatever. And most of the time it's complex. It's full. It's you have this, and they can hold that. So why can't we hold that for ourselves?
I actually did that exercise.
I love it. Yes.
And I wasn't actually surprised at what I heard, because it felt like pretty accurate. Like, I was like, oh yeah, I do that.
Yeah. Like people can actually see me, even though like I've been projecting this whole idea, like wanting to be perfect, for example, right? Projecting that I'm perfect and I got together, and then I ask them and they're like, oh, actually, no, I see all of you. And it's like, oh, so this whole thing I've been doing has been a waste of time. So maybe I could save my energy and just be myself.
Right.
Mind-blowing concept. I know.
I know. Well, it's just interesting. It's just like having, one of the things I love about getting older is like we're giving ourselves permission to be who we are.
Oh yeah.
It's just like, okay, this is how I am. This is
who
I am on the planet. It's like, okay.
I do love aging. I do love aging.
That's the best. I mean, there's things I don't like about aging, but that's my favorite part about aging.
Yeah, it's very confronting of our mortality and of our death. And obviously, get back to me in 10 years, and I'll probably have different opinions. But I am glad. I didn't understand in my 20s when people said that part of what I was experiencing is just an age thing. And I thought, no, I'm special. It's because of this. And then I've gotten older. I'm like, oh yeah, no, it was entirely an age thing. And like so much healing comes from doing the work while trusting the time. You know, we can't just expect time to make things better. It's not going to work that way. But if you do the work, then time does help.
It does. Yeah. And your brain chemistry changes. I mean, there's actually physiological reasons why we feel certain things as teenagers and not in our 30s. It just.
Yeah. And I'm also finding, that as I'm getting older, that things are getting more stuck. I'm also noticing that, you know, like ways in which I see the world is getting a little bit more stuck. And so that's the part of aging that I think we all have to be weary of, is that we need to be continually doing uncomfortable things and growing and moving our brain, doing exercises to get, to get uncomfortable, or else it is very easy as we get older to just get stuck in a certain way that the life has to be. And then that's going to create a tremendous amount of suffering.
Well, yeah, you can't teach old dogs new tricks is true. Like you do reach a certain point where you just don't grow anymore. But that's a choice. That really is a choice. Because if you choose to constantly grow,
your brain can always evolve.
And it shows. I think the older people that are working on their emotional health, that took care of their bodies, they age in a different way.
They do. It's wild.
I know.
They get stuck physically too. You can actually see their bodies physically stuck. Versus the people that are like emotionally oriented towards growth, you can see their limberness. I mean, I'm not talking about even disease or anything like that. Just like the structure of the human is really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, which is something I've always been mindful of. This idea of aging with grace, but also aging with my mind and my body. So being 95 and still being able to have conversations, to live on my own, to to be able to not deteriorate to the point where you can't really live a full life, which is a choice that you make when you're younger. Like you can't do it when you're that age.
Yeah, and some of it's literally not within our control, and I think that that's the scariest part of all.
None of it is. None of it is. I mean, look what's happening in our current climate. We don't have control of much, but we do have the control of our thoughts and where our mind goes and our mindset and our lifestyle choices. I mean, we do have a tiny bit of choice, and I think in those tiny choices that we have can be huge. They can have a huge impact on our life. So being able to work on your mindset is a big part of that. And eating well and emotional wellness. It's it's a lot of work being a human.
I couldn't agree more.
It's just a lot of work. Okay. So what do you love most about your life?
Um, what do I love most about my life? I, worked really hard as an entrepreneur to get to the point where it does feel like my potential is truly unlimited. And that
Hmm.
feels really wonderful that I'm nourished by my job. I love my work. It's not all of me, but a really important part of me. Uh, and that my growth potential and where I see my life evolving is just unlimited. It's exciting.
Nice.
I've
Yeah.
worked. It's intersection of work and privilege, right, has led me to this point, which I'm very grateful for. Um, and also I'm very, very, very um, grateful in my life that my dog is barking because my partner is coming home. That's why I'm moving. um, this is the perks of working from home during the pandemic, is having to negotiate space with your partner. But I'm also very, very grateful that I work in a field of human potential too. So we
Yeah.
were talking earlier about how, where I see love playing out in my work. It's like the cool thing about this work is that people's potential is unlimited. I know that it can be very easy to feel that humans suck. And I definitely can sometimes fall
Yeah.
into that too. Humans suck. We're obliterating our planet. We're electing corrupt officials. We're perpetuating broken systems. Like, why do we do this? And I think that that's real. And I'm always delighted by human ingenuity and how we
Yeah.
can fix any problem we create. It's possible. We have that within us. Um, and that's wonderful. That delights me. That gives me hope.
Yeah. Nice. Okay. How do you feel you receive the most love?
Mm, it's almost like the love languages thing,
Yeah.
that's where my mind started to go to. And like, it's thinking about how that has evolved. I think words of affirmation are still really, so I like to look at our love languages as unmet needs as children. Like we gravitate towards them now because there were needs that we didn't get met as children. I love words of affirmation and acts of service. I mean, when somebody
Mm.
does something for me, because I'm
Yeah.
so busy and I can be so individualistic and just do so much on my own. So when somebody does something that really alleviates my anxiety, like when they make a call, they call my doctor, like when my partner makes an appointment for my doctor or something like that. Oh my God, it's like smother me in butter and let's make out. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like the best feeling ever. It feels like you're really being taken care of.
Nice.
So
When
keep
do you feel the most love?
um I think when I'm really connected to source,
Mm.
when I'm connected to the vastness of the present moment, when I'm chanting. That's an important part of my spiritual practice, is chanting or journaling, um, dancing. I often feel a radical form of love when I'm in my body and dancing and moving. When I'm in nature, when I'm at the ocean,
Nice.
yeah.
Sweet. And where has love created a miracle in your life?
Ew, where has love created a miracle? Um, I would say one of the greatest miracles of my life has been my current partner.
Mm.
It's interesting because you attract a certain type of person and it's not working. Like, why am I so stuck in this pattern of attracting this type of person? And then you attract someone really different, and it's like a miracle. It's like, I didn't do enough healing work to attract this difference of a person. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm.
like I would need lifetimes of work to attract this different type of person. Um, and so then to have that partner and to be in that partnership, I think feels like a complete miracle for me. I feel very fortunate and very lucky.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
Yeah.
You deserve it.
Thank you. Oh, you're so sweet.
Yeah. Well, that is all the questions I have today.
All the pop love questions.
Yeah. So tell our audience where they can find you, how they can connect with you, and what are
Yeah.
ways to work with you.
You can go to my website, of course, thaissky.com. I'm also on Instagram at I am Thais Sky. I'm mostly on Instagram in terms of social. And then I have my podcast, Reclaim with Thais Sky. And I currently don't have capacity in my one-on-one coaching work, but there is a wait list on my website. And then through my group program, Worthy Women Rise, which is a year-long program, and doors will open in the fall of 2021. So we have a little bit whiles to go. But you can get on my newsletter list or join the conversation on Instagram. I really like to be over there.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Thais, for being on the show. I
Absolutely. Thank you for
love your
having me.
work.
Yeah.
I think the worthiness, just that wound is such an important one. And I'm so glad that you're
Yeah.
speaking to it and helping thousands and hopefully millions of women out there.
Fingers crossed. Thank you so much, lovely. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe and tune in on Tuesdays for new episodes. For more information about me, please follow me on Instagram at Corinne J. Camara and my website, CorinneCamara.com. Sending you lots of infinite love.